Everyone remembers their first graveyard loss. You're winning, dominating even, and then suddenly, skeletons. One by one, they piled into your tower like a swarm of termites. You panicked, no counter in hand. Too late. Game over. No aiming, no timing, just tap, drop, and win. Graveyard doesn't really reward skill, it punishes you for not being perfect. A card that turned strategy into chaos and made the worst players feel like gods. In today's video, we are breaking down how this one simple spell became the most brain-dead win condition in Clash Royale history, and how it nearly broke the game forever. But first, let's look at what Graveyard actually is, and why on paper it never should have been scary. Graveyard is a legendary spell unlocked in Arena 12, that being Spooky Town. On paper, it's just a slow, expensive skeleton army that you can place anywhere. A 4-tile radius, 2.2 seconds of eerie silence, then the first skeleton claws its way up. Over the next 9 seconds, 13 more follow, one every half second. Each one is weak, alone, nothing. But together, they melt towers if ignored for even a second. And the worst part? Graveyard scales with card levels, so if you're underleveled, you lose harder. It doesn't just punish bad plays, it punishes matchmaking. But Graveyard didn't just haunt the meta, it shaped it. It created one of the most infamous decks in Clash Royale history, Splashyard, a brutal combo of Graveyard and Poison that still refuses to die. Even now, it shows up in nearly 6% of over 1 million battles, proof that Graveyard never really went away. Classic Graveyard Giant decks? Still alive. They date back to Clash Royale's first year, and as recently as 2024, they were dominating top ladder and tournaments. Despite new cards, balance updates, and shifting metas, Graveyard has stayed relevant, which is rare for a card this old. Especially in grand challenges and casual play, it's never fully left. But Graveyard's story isn't all wins. It's had high points and long stretches where it barely held on, especially in top competitive play. To understand how one card could swing between beloved and broken, we need to go deeper into its history and revisit the moments that defined it. Graveyard's story doesn't start with its release. It starts with a leak. In September of 2016, Supercell was preparing to drop 4 new cards: Ice Golem, Mega Minion, Inferno Dragon, and a mysterious spell called Graveyard. Now, none of them had been officially revealed, but then everything leaked. Stats, screenshots, gameplay footage, and just like that, the community went wild. All 4 cards looked solid, but Graveyard was different. A spell that spawned endless skeletons directly on your tower. Players were convinced that it would break the game, and honestly, they weren't wrong. Graveyard officially launched on October 28th, 2016, and within days, it was everywhere. But most people forget that the original Graveyard wasn't the one we know today. It had a 10-second duration, a massive 5-tile radius, and started spawning skeletons after just 1.5 seconds. With those stats, it could summon up to 20 skeletons per use, 5 more than a full skeleton army today. Sounds busted, right? Well, not exactly. That huge radius came with a cost. The wider the circle, the more likely skeletons would spawn far from the tower, or worse, accidentally activate the king tower. One bad placement and your opponent got a 3rd tower for free. And then there was the real wild card. The spawns were random. Each skeleton popped up somewhere different inside the circle. Sometimes you got lucky, most would spawn right next to the tower. Other times they scattered everywhere, costing you 300 plus damage just because RNG wasn't really on your side that day. The randomness made Graveyard a high-risk, high-reward spell, especially in competitive play. It wasn't just about timing, it was about rolling the dice and hoping that the skeletons landed where you needed them before your opponent shut it all down. And that's still one of the biggest reasons why Graveyard is seen as a bad choice at the very top level of the ladder today. In serious competitive play, RNG should never, ever decide the outcome of a match. It's just unfair and not competitive. It makes sense and requires no further explanation. But in casual play, it was alright. And oh boy, the grand challenges were full of graveyard users. Everyone who played the game in late 2016 remembers that almost every grand challenge match you had a graveyard player. And this is where almost all the popular graveyard decks you see today emerged, such as Giant Graveyard, Bowler Graveyard, Freeze Graveyard, and more with their respective varieties. Some of the most popular graveyard decks featured a combination of Giant, Bowler, and Freeze cards, with the Giant standing out as the most commonly used win condition during that period. The premise behind using these decks was always simple: bait out most of your opponent's counter cards with your main win condition while the graveyard chipped away at their arena tower. Thanks to their high health pools, both the Giant and the Bowler were perfect tanks for supporting a graveyard push, absorbing damage while the skeleton spawned and dealt steady damage. There was also a beatdown variation that used Golem as the tank, but it was far riskier due to the Golem's extremely high elixir cost, making it harder to set up a successful push without getting punished. Freeze was ridiculous. One tap and every troop just stopped, frozen mid-animation while 20 skeletons tore through their tower without resistance. No panic drops, no last-second blocks, just pure, silent destruction. And Graveyard didn't arrive alone. It launched alongside Ice Golem, a cheap, tanky support card that slowed everything on death. It distracted towers, soaked damage, and brought just enough time for the skeletons to overwhelm. The synergy was perfect. Graveyard finally had its frontliner, and the combo stayed meta for months. But the real turning point, Bowler Graveyard, the first true version of what we now call splashyard. Before Poison became the standard, it was Bowler who made the archetype real. His rolling boulder wiped out every low-cost ground troop, skeletons, goblins, spear goblins, gone instantly. And unlike the Giant, Bowler didn't just tank. He fought back. He was the wall and the weapon. Then came Tornado. Dropped in November, Tornado unlocked a new level of control. It pulled every troop into one tight spot. And when paired with Baby Dragon, that splash damage melted everything. Ground or air, it did not matter. That combo was brutal. And when players combined Bowler plus Graveyard with Tornado plus Baby Dragon and topped it off with Poison for that guaranteed chip, that was it. A new meta was born. Slow, suffocating, and nearly unstoppable. It ruled ladder, it ruled grand challenges, and it all started with a grave in the middle of the arena. Graveyard also made a name for itself on the tournament stage. On December 17th, 2016, it was part of the winning deck used by a player named Backstab during the Crown Duel tournament, one of the most iconic early competitions in Clash Royale history.
No, I'm surprised. We are in overtime now, which means that the next tower to go down, that's it. That's the end of the game. So there is no coming back from that. So every point of health matters so much on those towers.
And both of these players, you can see, trying to get a read on their opponent.
Oh, what a prediction by Marcel! What a prediction!
That was insane.
The barbs are connecting! This might be it! This might be it! No!
Oh, wow, I thought he had him there. That was an amazing fireball there by Marcel. Very, very, very nice predictive move, and that's what Marcel is known for.
Backstab's top right tower is the first tower to enter the triple digits. Only 3 fireballs can end this game, or force a graveyard. Here comes another fireball in to hit the archers.
Oh, that was another great fireball there. Elite Barbarians on defense against these skeletons.
Oh, they're building up! They're building up quickly! Does he have another zap? He has anything else? Another thing's coming out. 50! No! He's zapped! Oh, Backstab wins! Backstab wins!
I can't believe this. I was speechless.
By the end of November, Graveyard's usage was already sitting at 25%, and it was not slowing down. It held that number for the next few months, even peaking at 27% in January of 2017. That kind of consistency was not common back then. Graveyard didn't just fit into the game, it shaped it. It became the core part of control decks, beatdown decks, and of course, the now famous splashyard archetype. Not many cards can say that they helped define an entire deck type that is still relevant years later. Players loved it. They used it to climb ladder, crush in grand and classic challenges, and rack up gold and cards. It was fun, unique, and surprisingly easy to play. Sure, it had its flaws. It cost 5 elixir, was shut down by smart counterplay, and RNG could backfire hard, but the strengths usually outweighed the risks. It was consistent, and for a while, it just kind of worked. But in 2017, something changed. A new meta emerged, and Graveyard had a new enemy: Spellbait. At the time, legendary cards were a huge deal. Pulling one felt like a miracle. They were rare, powerful, and totally game-changing. One of the most popular was the Princess. Long-range splash, low cost, super annoying. In fact, she was such a problem that Supercell literally created a new spell, the Log, just to counter her. But the Log didn't impress at first. Zap was cheaper, more flexible, and simply more useful in most matchups. That didn't last long. Everything changed in December of 2016 when Supercell dropped Goblin Gang into the game. Goblin Gang flipped the meta on its head. Suddenly, bait decks exploded in popularity. Players would use Goblin Gang to force out the Log and then drop Princess safely behind the tower to chip away for free. That strategy became what we now call log bait, and it took over. And Graveyard? It got left behind. The Log was everywhere. That forced players to use more minions, which were some of the best graveyard counters in the game. They hovered above the circle, just out of reach, deleting skeletons before they could even swing. Minions became the most used card in the game, even more than the Log itself. And to deal with minions, players started running Executioner. He was the cleanest counter. But he didn't just counter minions, he countered Graveyard too, which meant that even in splashyard decks, Executioner was both a blessing and a curse. And while Poison sounds like it would have been the perfect thing against Graveyard, it wasn't. Poison ticked too slow. One extra tick delay often meant a skeleton still get a hit, and at high levels, one hit could mean nearly 100 damage. Not enough to kill the push, and not fast enough to protect the tower. Graveyard's usage rate nosedived all the way to just 8%, from the top of the meta to barely hanging on, and players were shocked how fast it fell. But Graveyard wasn't done just yet. By March, it started climbing back. Slowly, quietly, it made its return. Minions were still strong, but players adapted. They found ways to keep them in check. Giant decks and other beatdown strategies became more common, and with them, Graveyard found its footing yet again. Usage climbing back to 21% for that month. Still, the meta was shifting constantly. Beatdown decks became the go-to, heavy strategies dominated, and Graveyard, it had a weird role. One month, it was weak. The next, it was back in the same niche control decks, and then it fell again. Then it rose. I mean, it was unstable, unpredictable, kind of just like the card itself. Along with the rise of beatdown decks came one of the most infamous cores in Clash Royale history: Golem and Night Witch. And if you played in 2017, you already know what that meant. Night Witch was terrorizing the meta for months after her release in May. She spawned bats before and after death, and when placed behind a golem, it was pure chaos. Graveyard even found its way into some of these decks, and surprisingly, it worked. This was one of the most exciting times in Clash Royale's life. The game was exploding with new content, new cards, new mechanics, new metas, broken decks dropped every other week. 2017 had some of the most diverse and chaotic metas we had ever seen. Graveyard thrived in that chaos. Old school decks like Giant Graveyard and Boulder Graveyard were everywhere. But so were fresh takes: Graveyard Cycle, P.E.K.K.A. Graveyard, Hog Graveyard, Night Witch Graveyard, and dozens of splashyard variations. Ice Golem, Bowler, Lumberjack, Ice Wizard, all being mixed and matched into lethal control decks. Graveyard became the second most popular win condition in the game. It was booming. Even after a tornado nerf in July hit splashyard a bit, Graveyard itself remained strong. Usage dipped slightly, but nothing major. The meta was just shifting non-stop. And then came August. Supercell finally decided Graveyard was overperforming and nerfed it on August 11th. The spell's duration was cut from 10 to 9 seconds. On paper, just 2 skeletons lost, but in reality, those skeletons mattered. Most of them died fast anyway, and removing 2 from the cycle made the whole spell feel weaker, especially when trying to chip down towers. The nerf didn't just reduce pressure, it confused players. Supercell said the change would help reduce RNG, which made no sense. Shortening the duration doesn't make spawns less random, it just makes the whole thing worse. And the result? Graveyard usage dropped to just 3.5% in August, a brutal fall. Supercell noticed, and in October they reworked the card instead. They brought the duration back to 10 seconds. Good, but they reduced the radius from 5 tiles to 4, a smart move that actually helped reduce RNG by keeping skeletons closer to the center. They also slowed the first skeleton spawn from 1.5 seconds to 2, and changed the spawn mechanics so skeletons would appear near the edge of the circle instead of purely random spots. The randomness didn't fully disappear, but it did get better. Graveyard felt more controlled, more balanced, but not broken. From October to December, usage hovered around 8%, with no major spikes. It was stable, quiet, until everything changed again. At the end of December, Royal Ghost entered the arena. He didn't just hit Graveyard, he hit the whole meta. His ability to go invisible and hit splash damage made him perfect at countering support troops. Graveyard decks suffered, but after he was nerfed, a new meta formed. One ruled by balance-changed princes, both regular and dark. Giant and Golem beatdown decks surged again, and Graveyard, it made another comeback. It carved out space as a strong counter to the new threats. Graveyard Freeze and Graveyard Control rose in popularity. Graveyard Control was essentially a twist on the Miner Poison formula, except instead of Miner, you used a Graveyard to win games, and it worked. In fact, it was one of the best decks at that time. Splashyard never left. If you're unfamiliar, Splashyard is the ultimate defensive deck. It is built to survive, to punish overcommitment. You defend, you build up, then you counterpush with Graveyard. That core concept made it timeless, and it stayed relevant for years. By July, Splashyard was back at the top, dominating grand challenges with the highest win rate of any deck. Its defense was simply too hard to break through. Then in April, Supercell added a new card, Rascals. And they fit right in. The Rascal Boy tanked everything, the Rascal Girls did massive range damage, and together they gave Graveyard decks the perfect blend of offensive pressure and defensive utility. Players loved it, and Graveyard's spot in the meta only got stronger. The rest of 2018? Pretty chill. Graveyard hovered around 7 to 8% usage all year. It wasn't broken, it wasn't dead, it just kinda, existed. In April, Supercell made a funny little tweak. They let you place the spell on the river, so now for some reason, if you wanted skeletons to spawn on both sides of the arena, well, you could do that. Cool, I guess. 2019 was a bit of a weird year, a fun year, and a broken year. Royal Giant decks took over. Mortar made a terrifying comeback, Elixir Golem was introduced and immediately caused chaos, and somewhere in the background, Graveyard just kept doing its thing. No big changes, no big nerfs. Graveyard was still mostly tied to tank cards and poison, that classic good old bread and butter combo. It worked. It always did. One example was control-style Graveyard decks that used Furnace. The passive chip pressure helped build up slow pushes, and when the opponent ran out of answers, you would drop the Graveyard and let the skeletons go to work. Even after years in the game, Graveyard still wasn't really seen as competitive, not on top ladder at least. It shined in challenges, always had, but on ladder it felt kinda niche. Community data showed Graveyard usage in the low single digits, with win rates hovering around 50%. No buffs, no nerfs, nothing directed. Again, just existed. February, same story. Graveyard didn't move. The meta was ruled by Hog Cycle, Expo Siege, and Royal Hogs. Graveyard kinda couldn't keep up with the speed and consistency of those decks. It showed up in a few grand challenge lineups, usually paired with poison, but it was still viewed as a specialist deck. Good in the right hands, but risky in the wrong ones. That 5 elixir cost, that hurt. Without a reliable tank, Graveyard was just too fragile, and most top-tier decks didn't give it the support it needed to thrive. Then came March. Supercell dropped a balance update, and for once, it helped. Barbarians were nerfed. Their hit points dropped by 13%, though they now spawn 5 instead of 4. But here's the thing. Barbarians were one of Graveyard's best counters. If you saw them on defense, your Graveyard push usually got deleted. After the nerf, suddenly skeletons started surviving. Graveyard plus poison pushes, especially in giant decks, became noticeably stronger. It wasn't a huge meta shift, no tier 1 spotlight, but it was good enough to boost Graveyard usage. Players felt the difference. Swarm counters were slightly squishier and Graveyard capitalized. Still, the card itself didn't get touched. No buffs, no love, just better conditions to survive in. Then came the Royal Giant. In mid-year, RG decks dominated everything. Fast cycles, strong support, and brutal spell combos like Royal Giant plus Lightning or RG plus Furnace, backed by splash units like Electro Wizard, Baby Dragon, and Archers. These decks chewed through graveyard defenses and erased the skeletons before they could do anything. Graveyard decks struggled, so what did players do? They adapted. Players built a brand new graveyard poison deck, one that brought barbarians back into the mix. But why barbarians? Simple. Barbarians were excellent against the Royal Giant. Drop them right in front of the RG and he'd barely scratch the tower. And because these decks often ran other strong support cards like Furnace, Electro Wizard, or Musketeer, they gave opponents a tough choice. If they wasted their Lightning or Fireball on your support, Barbarians would be free to shred the RG. If they held their spell, your support survived and the counter push became lethal. Meanwhile, splashyard players were thriving. Royal Giant wasn't their favorite matchup, sure, but their defense still held strong. That's what splashyard was built on. It wasn't about fast cycles or explosive pushes, it was about surviving, controlling the game, waiting for one mistake, and then pushing hard. But here's the thing. Supercell kept dropping overpowered cards, and not nerfing them, and splashyard players had to evolve. Their decks got smarter, tighter, more technical. It wasn't enough to just defend and graveyard. You had to outthink the meta. And they did. There's even an entire Reddit post from 2019 dedicated to mastering splashyard in that meta, and it proudly claimed the deck could stop almost any push, even the toxic rage-fueled chaos of Elixir Golem. It countered Royal Giant, it shut down Lava Hound, it stomped balloon decks, and as we said earlier, it even handled the Elixir Golem. Splashyard was the ultimate defensive deck. No matter what the meta threw at it, it found a way to survive. I've probably said it way too many times already, and I'll probably say it again, but Splashyard's defense was straight up OP. And if we're talking about this deck, it'd be a crime not to mention one of the best splashyard players out there. Meet Big O, the king of splashyard. He wasn't just good, he was the best splashyard player in the entire game. Golem crushed, P.E.K.K.A. no problem. Mortar decks that had everyone sweating back then, handled with ease. In April of 2019, Big O finished top 85 globally, and the splashyard deck he mastered had the 4th highest win rate out of every deck in the game. Graveyard saw a noticeable upswing in August. Season 2 dropped and the Royal API's Classic Decks release brought attention to a standout splashyard variation, the Cold Dead Hands deck. It paired Graveyard with Cannon Cart, and it worked brilliantly. With Tornado and Poison locking down defense and Baby Dragon plus Cannon Cart leading counter pushes, this lineup showed exactly why Graveyard still had a place in the meta. On ladder, Graveyard decks like Giant Graveyard and Graveyard Poison started climbing again. Stats Royale showed mid-single-digit usage and win rates over 50% for well-built control decks. That March nerf to Barbarians still paid off. Weaker swarms meant graveyard skeletons broke through more often. In clan wars and tournaments, more classic decks started including graveyard yet again. The Cold Dead Hands archetype stuck around for the following months. It was just that good. Even in the cursed Elixir Column Night Witch meta, Splashyard still found a way to survive. By the end of 2019, Graveyard had a 12% usage rate, and that's pretty impressive considering so many cards disappeared under the pressure of Elixir Golem, Night Witch, and Battle Healer. But Graveyard still held on. In fact, it wasn't just surviving, it was winning. Surgical Goblin and Morton, two of the best players in the world, faced off in the 2019 championship. Morton chose a Graveyard deck against Surgical Goblin, and this match is considered one of the most intense in Clash Royale history. Let's watch part of it together.
A lot to deal with. He zaps the Skellies! That was the zap on the Skellies to reset the Inferno, but the Skellies then did not kite.
Wow, beautiful play by the most decorated player in Clash Royale history.
And finally, Morton gets down to Graveyard, but that feels like a desperation Graveyard.
Poison is getting some value on the Magic Archer, Ewiz, and Royal Ghost.
Missing those first couple ticks could be detrimental on that Ewiz. Never mind.
Ball gets in, zap behind, Skeletons to kite, Magic Archer trying to create some room. P.E.K.K.A will go down to the Inferno Tower.
Skeletons played right on top of that Royal Ghost. One Magic Archer arrow came in, cleaned them all out. Morton's got to do a little bit better job of utilizing those Skellies.
Surgical Goblin playing brilliantly thus far. Morton trying to find a good spot to take an advantage.
And most likely that last card from Surge is poison, and he has not used it yet to defend the graveyard because he wants these big counter pushes to come in.
Final 60 seconds approaching. Only 300-ish HP separating these two players. Graveyard one more time for Morton.
He needs to get any damage in on that tower. Poison comes down. That's not going to be enough to put him in the lead, especially because most likely that last card is poison.
Morton has to spend a little bit on the right-hand side just to not eat a massive amount of damage. And here we go, left-hand side.
Magic Archer not put in the right spot.
Just barely falling short on that geometry.
Valkyrie high, nope, Skellies come in. Magic Archer still does not connect. Morton might be able to take this, Rich.
This is absolutely wild. Graveyard down, and now Surgical Goblin going high with the Royal Ghost. Bandit trying to defend against Graveyard.
Skelly's trying to get to tower. Poison is down, but we have Morton in the lead. If he gets the snowball down and Surge zaps, he still wins.
Inferno Tower high.
Magic Archer gets a shot.
Connecting.
Magic Archer gets another shot.
Martin trying to get Graveyard on tower. Poison gets down.
780 full on.
1 HP. 1 HP.
Oh my God.
God. Surgical Goblin does it. Liquid's going to the final.
1 HP. That's all it took. And that is about as heartbreaking as it gets for SK Gaming.
Oh my God.
Following that intense match, 2020 started off mixed. Early on, Graveyard was still meta. The game was dominated by heavy cycle and siege decks like Three Musketeers, minor decks, and 2.9 Expo, Hognado, Splashyard countered all of them and was considered one of the top control decks. But then came Season 8 in February, and the meta flipped. Royal Giant, Lavaloon, P.E.K.K.A Control, Goblin Barrel Bait, they all took over. Graveyard kinda disappeared. No Graveyard decks made it into the classic decks list that month. It was too slow, too punishable, and Poison couldn't keep up with the swarm-heavy, spell-bait style decks. Oh, and Supercell dropped Firecracker in February. You can probably guess how that went. Still, Graveyard didn't die. It averaged 10 to 20% usage in grand challenges and top ladder. By mid-year, it even peaked at 15 to 18%, and that's pretty high. Too high for Supercell's taste. The card itself wasn't broken, but the new pairings were. That's what caused problems. Decks started running Graveyard with Royal Recruits, one of the most low-skill, overloaded cards of 2020. The combo was brutal, so Supercell stepped in. On November 3rd, they changed the spawn radius. Skeletons could now only spawn 3.5 tiles away instead of 3. Sounds like a nerf, right? Well, wrong. It accidentally buffed the card, reverting it to its 2016 spawn radius, the same one that caused issues back then. Graveyard got stronger, and as more broken cards got paired with it, things got out of control. So on November 18th, Supercell walked it back. They dropped the spawn range back to 3 tiles. Then on December 9th, they made one more change, increased the first spawn delay from 2 seconds to 2.2. And that one actually stuck. According to Royal API, Graveyard's usage rate dropped to 9% in December, a massive 11% fall from the months before. 2021, well, didn't bring anything too crazy, but it's still worth talking about, because this year marked the return of an OG Graveyard deck. But before we jump into that, if you've made it this far, you know what, maybe consider scrolling down and hitting that subscribe button. Also, you know, you can tap the bell so you never miss a new upload. And if you want to chat Clash Royale or share some of your deck lists, you can come hang out in the Discord server. Links down there in the description as well. All right, back to December 2020, when a strange new legendary joined the game, that being Mother Witch. She had a unique ability. Any troop she hit turned into a piglet that ran straight at the enemy tower. And Graveyard, full of troops. Weak ones. So did Graveyard still work? Well, surprisingly, yeah. At first, people didn't really think much of Mother Witch. She didn't seem like much of a threat. But that changed fast. By May, her usage rate climbed past 20%, and Graveyard got hit hard. The card disappeared from the meta almost overnight. Even Poison, Graveyard's go-to support spell, could not keep up, and started getting replaced by Fireball. But of course, nothing lasts forever. By mid-2021, Mother Witch's usage rate declined, and Graveyard made a comeback. Beatdown decks were getting popular again, and with them came the return of the one and only Giant Graveyard. But it wasn't the old version. The deck had evolved. Now it included the Witch, who had received a small range buff in March. She spawned skeletons constantly, distracting defenders while your push developed. Skeleton Army filled a similar role, and Fireball replaced Poison for a more immediate value. There were many versions of this deck, some even used Freeze, risky but deadly if timed correctly. Skilled players started climbing yet again. Some finished in the top 50, a few even hit number 1 with Giant Graveyard. Usage stayed low, around 5 to 8%, but win rates were strong. It was a high skill deck, and that always filters usage stats. And that brings us up to October, the Champions update, and everything changed. A new rarity, new mechanics, and one new champion in particular caught everyone's attention: Skeleton King, Graveyard on command. It wasn't amazing at launch, but paired with Graveyard, you had skeletons for days. You see, Skeleton King paired with Graveyard Witch and even Skeleton Army, and that synergy was key. Every time a troop died, any troop from either team, Skeleton King absorbed their soul, adding one skeleton to his ability. With decks full of swarms like Witch and Graveyard, his bar filled up instantly, and if like 20 skeletons just died in the arena while Skeleton King was deployed, his ability would just be ready to use. There were quite a lot of variations of this deck at that time. If Skeleton King was the worst champion in the game during this period, this deck made him one of the best, even outclassing the Archer Queen, who was always at the top. So every deck that contained the Skeleton King always had Graveyard in it. You had 2 Graveyards, not for 10 elixir, but for 7 if we exclude Skeleton King's elixir cost himself. The deck got trendy real quick, with a 63% win rate from 21,000 games. More than half. So because of this, Graveyard was on top of the cards for quite some time. It was doing really well for a diverse meta of 2021, averaging around 8 to 9% usage on both Grand Challenges and Top Ladder. The Skeleton King and Graveyard combo stopped appearing in other popular Graveyard decks as well, for example Graveyard Poison, also known as, you guessed it, Splashyard. Not only did you play Splashyard now, the best defensive deck in the whole game with godly stats, you now had one of the most deadly combos to counterattack with. These two were completely busted. Top players on the leaderboard were running the Skeleton King Graveyard combo and finishing with records like 36 wins and 4 losses, which is honestly insane. Over time, Supercell made some balance changes to keep things fair, especially targeting 2 specific cards, that being Graveyard and Skeleton King. In April, both were nerfed. One skeleton was removed from the Graveyard by reducing its duration from 10 seconds to 9.5, and Skeleton King's ability went from summoning 20 skeletons down to 16. It didn't sound like much, and honestly, it wasn't, but it was just enough to keep both cards from getting out of hand. 4 fewer skeletons meant less damage on the tower, and that mattered. However, that nerf didn't stop top players like Mugi, who used a Graveyard deck with Golden Knight and Cannon card against Michifu in the 2021 World Finals. You can feel the pressure he puts on, and it shows exactly why Graveyard can still be a nightmare to deal with.
That was actually, if he intended that, and we are, oh wow! What a dash! He was down HP at the start of that. He was down big time in the game. Now he's up on elixir. He's up on damage. Absolutely just a win for him overall. Earthquake comes in, but it's a little bit late. This is not going to do that much damage. That Metagame is there. And
oh boy. Graveyard Poison right onto those stab goblins, and just like that, Michifu in a lot of trouble with 25 seconds left.
Yeah, he's just gonna have to continuously cycle the earthquakes, and this time around, no bomb tower until the end. What a smart play there from Mugi. That is what differentiates him from everyone else. He knew what was coming. He knew that the earthquake had to happen, and he decides not to go ahead and defend it. On top, you get another poison, and that is it.
We have an amazing winners bracket final coming your way later today.
In this next clip, you'll see Line take on Surge TS using a very mid-ladder style deck, Mega Knight, Goblin Hut, and Graveyard. And this is where you truly see just how one push can completely destroy a tower.
+1 trade there when you talk about that interaction with the Goblin Huts. Then the second one on the board. Nice MK tanking here for that Graveyard. Good arrows coming in. MK leaps on the tower, and just like that, Line could be taking this set. That's it, Josh. That's going to do it. Arrows plus poison. Surge TS has been eliminated.
251 HP left. Poison coming down. Not even going to go in with the Graveyard. Probably just going to cycle the arrows. We see the celebration. Surge TS waving goodbye. Unfortunate situation for him. He just can't do it.
Throughout the year, Graveyard's usage stayed steady, hovering between 7% and 10%. But then came November of 2022, and everything changed. That month saw the release of 2 game-breaking cards, that being Phoenix and Monk. They flipped the meta upside down and made a lot of cards feel useless overnight, but Graveyard, it thrived. While Monk and Phoenix were destroying everything in sight, Graveyard quietly climbed to a 20% usage rate. And that is massive, especially for a spell that doesn't do direct damage like Log or Fireball. Somehow players found a way to make it work, even in one of the most chaotic metas Clash Royale had ever seen. Once Phoenix and Monk got nerfed, Graveyard usage dropped back to normal, but it didn't disappear. In fact, Graveyard and Skeleton King became more connected than ever. The synergy between them was just too good, and now they're almost always seen together. Instead of falling out of the meta, they adapted and stayed dominant as a deadly duo. It started showing up in giant graveyard decks, mortar decks, and of course, splashyard decks, still the most popular of them all, no matter what the balance changes looked like. Graveyard always seemed to sneak back into the meta whenever one of its support cards got buffed. Take August of 2024 as an example. Ice Wizard received a small buff, and just like that, the classic splashyard deck made a brief comeback. It didn't dominate, but it reminded everyone just how strong that archetype used to be. Before we jump into the next year, where again, everything changed, I mean, this is Clash Royale, I want to show you some clips from the 2022 World Championship. Graveyard was actually one of the most picked win conditions of the entire tournament. We're starting with some intense moments, and it all builds up to the craziest plays of 2022, so stick around because you definitely don't want to miss what's coming. In this clip, Samuel Bizzotto faces off against Lucas with a graveyard deck featuring Golden Knight, Bowler, and NATO, and trust me, the ending will catch you completely off guard.
Expected. Lava, I feel like he should go in for the reset, and that's exactly what we're going to see. I love that play from Lucas.
And Lucas did have a pretty significant elixir advantage there with 4 on the board, +1 in the hole, but as you said, decides to reset a bit here instead. Down by quite a lot, 1088 to 2791 on that left-hand side, as we are just 15 seconds away from triple elixir.
Ice Wizard will be able to take out the Skeleton Dragons. Will take its time though. Inferno Dragon on top of the Mighty Miner is going to be brilliant. Activation already used, so that's why it was able to get so much value.
Miner and the Night Witch.
Oh, look at the Inferno Dragon on the right.
Oh my word.
Look at the Inferno Dragon on the right.
Will it burn it all the way down?
It's done.
Oh my God,
It's done.
it does. Lucas can't believe it. Samwell with the double fist pump and the Inferno Dragon.
In the following clip, we have KK going against Air Surfer. This matchup is very unique because of KK's playstyle. He didn't use a single graveyard until the last 90 seconds of the game. And then he absolutely crushed Air Surfer with immense pressure. I mean, just watch.
Body block, make sure not a lot of splash gets on tower, but still gets 2 shots in here late. 2184 to 2719.
I really like the patience from KK there. He waited for the Arch Queen to be out of cycle before he went for that graveyard, and it was the perfect moment. That Baby Dragon getting a lot of value, preventing the counter push and getting some nice shots in the tower.
And he might go right back in here. We'll find out in just one moment. Instead, he sets up an Ice Wiz on the other side. AQ is out of cycle for the moment.
Mirror
and
last
a
card.
mirror giant skeleton comes down, and a graveyard defensively here for KK. I'm sure he's very, very happy he did not sell out.
I respect that defensive graveyard. A lot of the time is a nice play against a big tank like that, especially when he wants to save his Valkyrie for the Royal Hog specifically. Archer Queen doing her thing, getting a lot of value once again here. kind of taking out everything, forcing out a lot of elixir. Here comes a Valkyrie. Are we going to see Graveyard? Absolutely. Baby Dragon is down the board with no Queen, and Cycle is definitely the right moment.
And Juicy, just one thing to talk about here. Actually, let's look at these final moments. 15 seconds remain.
Huge arrows value. Valkyrie on the defense doing a nice job of just cleaning up absolutely everything on the board.
KK should have this in the bag. No giant skeleton bomb to get on top of tower. You know an arm and a leg is going to be spent on that Archer Queen. And with 2 seconds remaining, Air Surfer will drop game number 1.
In this clip, we have the world champion Mugi going against Sandbox. Mugi actually made a big mistake at the start of the match, losing 2,000 HP on his tower, while Sandbox's tower remained completely untouched. But let's be real, I wouldn't be showing you this if something crazy didn't happen, or, you know, does he make a comeback? Either way, it was an insanely close match, and what Mugi pulls off is seriously impressive.
At this point, we saw this, I think it was Samuels versus Lucas, where the game was completely controlled, but then it just gets weird. Once the bowler really starts to have its way on the map, starting to take out troop after troop, it becomes difficult when you're in Sandbox's position. He does have a chance, even with this deficit on Mugi's side.
Great poison there. Resets the Inferno, pushes into the poison as well. AQ up high to set the line. And right now, Sandbox is just firmly in control.
The way he has used his AQ has really just won him the game so far. Always placing it at the bridge, even when he can't, you know, it's not providing too much value, but it's just walking around and it's just kind of halting the game overall. The AQ and the Giant Skeleton has been brilliant from Sandbox.
An ocean of blue crossing the bridge here, and now Sandbox may be finding himself in trouble. Gets right back around to that Archer Queen. Ability will be enough. Freeze comes down though just in time, and a Giant Skeleton once again, but that bowler has been taking classes from the Magic Archer. He's got the lineup.
Right there, Bowler gets 2, gets 3, can he get the 4th? There we go, it is all tied up at this point. And that's the thing, Sandbox can't cycle the poisons freely because then the Graveyard Freeze becomes that much more dangerous.
30 seconds remaining, cannot use the ability without placing something else, so a Mortar comes down to make sure that Golden Knight does not get on tower. Freeze comes in, Poison is still there to clean up. He goes to the same spot again. Mugi recognizes and catches the Miner.
Ice was on top of the Miner, 14 seconds left. Bowler cycled in the middle. He's gonna have to go in with Graveyard Freeze. I don't think it's gonna be enough though. Sandbox, Miner, plus Snowball. We should see a defensive.
Poison defensive! Poison defensive! The Poison comes down in time! That's enough! Sandbox takes game 1 off the world champion!
Mugi did everything that he could, but Sandbox played it too well.
In the following clip, we see the king himself, the Prince of Egypt, Mohammed Light, multiple-time world champion who made over $1 million just from Clash Royale. Insane. Here he's facing off against Samuel Bazzotto, and in this match, completely caught me off guard. Mo made some absolutely wild plays, just like you'd expect.
Barely misses perfect placement from Mohammed Light, which is surprising to absolutely nobody.
Poison on the Flying Machine, Cannon Cart in the back. If you're Mo right now, you're gonna switch lanes. He does have more damage on the right-hand side, but as a splasher player, you need to be playing same lane as your opponent. Get those very nice defenses and convert to the counter pushes, and that's exactly what he's doing. No, he pressures this right-hand side, perfect moment.
And Icewiz gets on tower, Minion Horde to respond. That's great poison value there for Mohammed Light. Damage is pouring in the slow, making that Princess Tower shoot much more slowly. 2074, 1286. Mohammed Light has Sam up against the ropes.
Huge push, counter push from Samuel on the left-hand side. Cannon Cart's gonna get a lot of value. Flying Machine, Cannon Cart, Mortar, Miner on the map. Mo does not have a lot of elixir right now.
Mo's definitely getting overwhelmed here. He has a little shrug of the face, maybe okay with what's happening. Mortar gets a shot in on that tower. 1344, 1286, 90 seconds remain.
This game is so close. The further it gets here, the splashyard is going to have a further and further advantage, especially with the Skelly King, a champion in this deck. That 3-card cycle Graveyards can be devastating a triple.
And you see there Samuel piling up at the bridge, baiting out that poison, now knowing the Minion Horde kind of has a clear path, but you still have to think about that NATO and what it can do with an Icewiz or Baby Dragon in tow.
Not able to pick up the Miner. And Sam is going to take the damage lead by quite a bit here. Mortar at the bridge. Tombstone going to pick this up. Make sure it's not splashing on that Skelly King. And here comes the Graveyard on the right.
And a nice body block there by Basoto. Flying Machine in the back instead of the Minion Horde. Poison not on top of the Flying Machine. Decent cleanup there for Samwell, and then he goes Minion Horde at the bridge.
Icewiz gets a solid value here. Another mortar to the left. You have to distract it. You have to catch this miner as well. Barbell coming down left. Tornado's going to pull that miner off the tower. But watch this cannon cart. He does get the Skelly King down in time. I think he's okay.
Perfect timing, perfect placement there for Mo, but only 996 to 981. As you said, Juicy Splashyard should be flourishing right now with only 26 seconds remain. Nice high line set with that Minion Horde, getting on top of the Baby Dragon, and a miner goes to the tower.
The pre-poison for the Skarmy, that's going to be a huge connection. That's going to be tower down on the right-hand side. Mo Light going to take the win in that match.
Mohamed Light!
Mohamed Light really enjoyed using Graveyard in 2022. In this next clip, he goes up against Morten, who, if you remember, was in that legendary match between Surgical Goblin back in 2019. But this time, it's Mo playing Graveyard, and the pressure he puts on Morten is just incredible. He keeps him on edge the entire time.
Maybe a half step early.
Is in trouble, Rich. He did not have a great response there, and that Golden Knight connects big time with the Skellies. 862 and a well played comes out.
I feel like he was a little worried there about that freeze, trying to figure out the timing, and then, of course, slightly different result there. Sets up Golem in the opposite lane, Inferno Dragon to meet it.
And you heard Juicy talk about you need to go in the same lane if you're playing a Graveyard. And as those Baby Dragon belches come in, Morten decides to change the conversation, and he drops a Golem to work down this right-hand lane.
And there comes the freeze. Lightning does not get on the Inferno Dragon. Instead, does some damage down below. Golden Knight gets its dash in. Flying Machine still on the board.
22-13 to 382. Mohamed Light in a very substantial lead. And an Inferno in front. Morten calls good game. He knows he's got nothing in the tank. Mohamed Light saw him looking and caught him.
Bar Barrel in, trying to fight it off. Nothing there. Freeze gets it done. GG, well played.
And finally, my #1 favorite match of 2022. This is exactly why I love watching top players face each other. The decisions, the timing, the intensity, it really just builds into something that is unforgettable. And you'll know exactly what I mean when you see these absolutely fantastic plays from both sides.
This Mega Knight at bay, and Mohamed Light screams into the lead.
35 seconds left in regulation. NATO to clean all that up. Although Morten will go into our double elixir, into our sudden death pier with a potential elixir advantage.
Yeah. Ooh, and Rogo's gonna get on tower here. Inferno and King gonna help out, but Morten narrows that gap.
A little less than 200 HP separating these two players at the moment. Bar Barrel to try to help out with that brilliant Mighty Miner play. And now Ram Rider behind, E-Wiz as well. Golden Knight trying to play defense here. Ram Rider not going to connect courtesy of a defensive freeze.
But you look at the elixir difference here, and the biggest thing is, yes, there's a very healthy Baby Dragon on the board. Morten has to play a very strong defense here. No trigger is pulled. Baby Dragon does get the splash, though. Mo decides to reset.
Let's see, does he go high with the E-Wiz? And he does. E-Wiz to work. Bowler trying to stop the E-Wiz from being involved in the game here, but the Mega Knight leaps forward. E-Wiz does go off the board. Nice sequence here for Mo.
Yeah, no splash damage in there for Morten. 1858 to 1731. Damage done on the right-hand side. Maybe going to see another defensive freeze here. No.
Wow. What a
there
connection.
It is.
And now that late defensive freeze as well. So Mo starting to fall behind a little bit here as Morten has opened up the first significant lead of about 400 HP.
And you can see Morten goes, I am never going to have that poison out of cycle again. I am never going to try to defend in a different way because we saw what happened before. So it's all about Mo trying to bait out that poison by stacking at the bridge.
Graveyard down, Mega Knight trying to hold on up top, and again that Inferno Dragon doing its job. Royal Ghost looking for a distraction up high. Mother Witch taking care of E-Wiz in the mix.
Mother Witch finally in cycle to deal with that Graveyard, but not a lot out of it. And now Mo is piling up on that left-hand side.
Dual lane pressure now from Mohamed Light as the focus on the Grand Rider on the right-hand side. The left-hand side turns into a problem for Mo. Mother Witch in the mix. Piggy's on the tower.
That bowler lineup was perfect on the Ewas, but Mo still dealing with a lot. 1354 and 1326. Ram Rider behind, another defensive freeze in.
The dual lane pressure has been huge. 19 seconds left, 1326 to 1314. Right now, Poison trying to make that gap here, but Graveyard in. Is Mother Witch available? She is way in the back.
Look at that
Golden Knight
dash!
for a big
Look at
time
the dash! That is
Golden Knight
massive!
dash. Freezes in. 5 seconds left. Can the Poison tick enough? Can the Poison? It's not going to do
It's not enough! It's not enough! Mo takes game #1, and he's now 1 away from being world champion!
Unfortunately, Graveyard kind of started to fall off a bit after 2023. Well, not exactly fall off, it just became unfavorable for most players. Graveyard turned into more of a niche pick than a go-to win condition. Royal API shows its usage rate sitting around 1% in early 2025. On ladder, it never really climbed past a few percent after 2023. And even with the introduction of evolutions, Graveyard didn't really see a real spike. Top players still use it here and there, but overall its presence in the meta has stayed very low. For example, in 2023, Graveyard was barely used in the World Championship, a huge drop compared to 2022, but I still found one matchup that had me on the edge of my seat. It was Mugi versus Pedro. Mugi running Graveyard, Pedro with Electro Giant, and honestly, right up until the final seconds, you have no idea who's gonna win. The longer you watch, the crazier this match gets, so stay with me. I promise you won't regret it.
That's right. Huge cheers for Mugi right there. Pedro just messing up the defense, and it really is as simple. This is one of the most basic tips you can ever have for Graveyard. Archers are out of cycle. Let's go all in.
And now trying to get some of that back is Pedro, with Bowler and Archers behind this Electro Giant.
Bowler getting stuck right there, and that is very unfortunate for Pedro. If the Bowler had just bowled one time, that could have been very intimidating for Mugi. Potentially could have flipped how much damage both of these players have done. Instead, Mugi in the driver's seat.
Well timed by Pedro, setting up that tombstone in the back. And now another slowdown here as Pedro just chooses to change the conversation to the other side of the arena.
So the reason why we're seeing Tombstone placed in the back behind the Crown Tower is because, well, actually, no, just kidding. I was thinking that he had Lightning for Mugi. That's not true. That's what's in Pedro's deck. Instead, just trying to slow down the game. That's why we're seeing the Tombstone in the back.
And again, continuing to want to make Mugi switch lanes. No problem there for the former world champion playing Graveyard.
A lot of splash yards seen today, and we haven't seen a ton of success so far, but we might be seeing it right here. Great start for Mugi.
And the Bowler, a little bit of room. That's an aggressive Evolved Archers here.
And right there is that 3, is that 4 bowls on top of the tower. We see Mugi upset right there. It is shocking how the Bowler was able to get so much damage. And that's actually one of those things. The Knight, it's supposed to be so great because ranged troops aren't going to be doing a ton of damage right there. It's able to stay alive and allow the Bowler to bowl.
And Pedro gets an extra shot from the Archer on the left-hand side, so suddenly the change of lanes has given him the lead, 1837 to 1261.
So right now, Tombstone in the back, not allowing for him to go all in, because if he does, Pedro's just going to be able to block everything at the bridge and force just defensive poison throughout.
Graveyard down on the right-hand side, Tombstone in reply, Baby Dragon holding the line, so the tankage is not happening. Bowler in. Significant damage. As we are in sudden death, Mugi has nearly tied things up.
Doing it for the fans.
How does Pedro want to respond? Split Archers behind the King Tower. Mugi could be getting very aggressive right here, and he does. Knight Graveyard at the bridge. NATO in response, not going to allow a tank, and the tower, with the help of one Archer and the Baby Dragon, going to clean up everything very nicely.
75 seconds left. The margins so close between these two.
And one thing I've recognized throughout this tournament is that bridge bowlers are so valuable because of those tombstones and the fact that these tombstone skeletons are going to be taken away, and we see it right there. That is huge for Pedro.
Tornado pulls things back. Bowler does go, but does not take the Little Prince off the board. Finally, Little Prince gone, and now Pedro poured it on in the left-hand lane. Graveyard play probably incoming here, or was that just a feint from Mugi?
Right there, Archers in response. Tombstone is going to stay perfectly healthy. Will the bowler get a shot? Oh my goodness! Knight does not kite, but that's okay.
Electro Giant in. Tombstone to pull all the way over. Bowler goes to that left-hand lane. E-Giant does not pull with the Tornado.
And right there, 1203, 300 HP severed into two players. He needs to get a Tombstone down, and he does.
13 seconds left. 886, 922. Graveyard and Poison in. Tombstone, Baby Dragon to defend. So are the Archers. Lightning. Will it tick enough? 587.
Oh,
no, it
Pedro does it!
Oh,
Pedro does it!
Pedro wins by 18 HP.
Available stats today suggest Graveyard wins roughly 50 to 55% of its matches. According to Royal API's ladder data, it holds around a 47% win rate in recent samples. In high-level play, it performs moderately well, not dominating, but holding its own when used correctly. Usage in top 200 or top 1000 ladder is minimal, so sample sizes are pretty small, but its occasional appearance in top player leaderboard decks suggests its win rate is slightly above average for a win condition. Graveyard hasn't received any major tweaks between 2023 and 25. The only direct balance change came in March of 2024 when its duration was cut from 9.5 seconds to 9, removing yet another skeleton. Since then, no buffs or nerfs have been applied, which shows Supercell sees the card as balanced. As for Graveyard's place in the Evolution era, options are mixed. A lot of players were frustrated with the Evolutions update in general. One Reddit thread even said, quote, "Evolutions killed Clash Royale, and the game is now about who can drop their overpowered Evo card." That criticism wasn't aimed at Graveyard specifically, but it reflected the shift in how the game was being played. Specifically for Graveyard, some players say it was impossible to stop in double elixir pushes, especially when paired with cards like Goblinstein or P.E.K.K.A. Others argue it's just above average and not game-breaking, compared to win conditions like Lava Hound, strong but manageable. After the March 2024 nerf, most of the community discussion centered on RNG versus skeleton count, but there wasn't any real outcry for further nerfs. Overall, both the casual and competitive sentiments are mixed. Graveyard is respected when played well, but most agree it has clear counters like Tornado and Poison, and it's definitely beatable. Based on community feedback, there are really two big reasons why Graveyard isn't used that often in top ladder or competitive play. The first is simple. RNG. We've mentioned it at the beginning of this video, and it still holds true now. Graveyard's randomness makes it unreliable. In high-level matches, consistency is everything. One Graveyard push might land over 1,000 damage if the skeletons spawn well, but the next push with the exact same setup might only do 700, just because the skeletons spawned slightly differently. That kind of unpredictability is a deal breaker for many top players. They'd rather not leave their win condition up to chance. The second reason, well, Graveyard just isn't the most favorable option in the current meta. That doesn't mean that it's weak, it's still powerful in the right hands, but the current meta is full of win conditions that are easier to play, more consistent, and safer under pressure. So when the stakes are high, most pros go with something they can rely on. These two reasons, especially the randomness, are why a lot of competitive players avoid Graveyard. Some even hate it, calling it unfair and unforgiving. But if you thought Graveyard was wild, just wait until you see what the Monk did. He didn't just break the game, he shattered it with basically no effort. Want to know how? Well, check out the video all about the Monk and how he completely took over Clash Royale. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. I'll see you there.